Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the podcast Strikes Back. My name is George and you're listening to our review of X-Men Dark Phoenix with the boys Connor
Hey.
and Benny.
Hi there.
You like those points?
So
Mate,
good.
Points
So
and
Points
pointy.
went so aggressive lately. I'm just like,
It's got to happen. Guys, we're here for the 12th X-Men film directed by Simon Kinberg in his directorial debut, and who in fact has come back to the franchise after writing X-Men Last Stand all those years ago. The film was delayed 2 times, originally supposed to come out in January 2018, then February 19. Now we finally have the film and we've seen it. And what we like to do in our non-spoiler review is just to catch up on where everyone was feeling with the franchise and the trailers, and then we can get into the film itself. I believe I went to you last week, Benny, for Godzilla. So, Connor, you're up. And I pointed at you.
happy days. All right. So I feel like we're all on the same page, as we usually are with these kinds of things.
Are we on the same page?
Well, it's we've talked about it enough. I'm pretty confident.
All right.
Look, this franchise is pretty hit and miss. When it hits, it's great. I still remember watching the first X-Men movie and just getting like the biggest kick out of it. I really enjoyed it. And then kind of as the franchise progressed, it was kind of one of those things where every once in a while you get one that was really good, like, Logan or
Logan.
or Days of Future Past I really enjoyed. Things like that.
X2.
Yeah, and then you'd get like real stinkers like Last Stand and Apocalypse, and then there were some ones that were kind of in between. I mean, I have a very weird relationship with First Class because I thought that the first half of that movie was really cool, and the second half was just a bit bleh. So yeah, and coming up to this, off the back of Apocalypse, I didn't really have an enormous amount of confidence for them to, I guess, bring this franchise back. But I kind of, gave myself a deep breath before I walked into the cinema and decided to go into it with as fresh a mind as I could.
Nice.
Yeah.
And what did you think of the trailers?
Trailers looked awful. They looked. There was nothing about them that made me really want to see this film. Like there was no kind of oomph to them, I suppose, and that might just be because
X Factor. Maybe?
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Yeah, you should have saved that for your when you were talking.
Don't give that shit away, man. It's gold.
It might have just been because of the lackluster response to Apocalypse, but I didn't really feel any weight to it. I felt like they kind of, they knew they were on their way out. They were just like, let's wrap this shit up. Let's just kind of put as much of a bow tie on it as we can. They were obviously not scared about killing characters or anything like that. So I was like, well, they'll, knock off some kind of character to make us feel something. And then, yeah, so I don't know. The trailers didn't really do anything for me.
Cool. Benny, franchise, trailers, go.
Alrighty. What a roller coaster ride the X-Men franchise is. I feel like it never gets any credit for kind of kicking off the superhero boom.
Totally.
With that first movie that just set up so many of the rules that we kind of live by now. And I think a big part of that is, like you were saying, Connor, some of the movies are great and some of them are just some of the worst. And the fact that there's like a big reboot right in the middle there kind of muddies things up, but then the continuity's mixed back together again, but then the continuity in between films doesn't make any sense either. It's
all over the place.
It's such an odd franchise. Seeing some of the advertisements lately that are like kind of showing a bunch of scenes from all the previous movies together, it's like, no, don't do that. None of these make any sense together. And then watching just the actual trailers for this, yeah, there was nothing in particular that stood out as really good. In fact, it looked so much like a remake of X3, down to being directed and written by the guy who wrote X3, which is, one of the less loved
Concerning.
entries. So yeah, it was a lot of reason to worry. And then there's the whole Fox merger thing that just really put the status of this film up in the air. Who knows what they were doing with it? Who knew if anyone working on it gave a shit about it? Even with the best of intentions, these movies most of the time turn out pretty bad. So then don't even get me started on the Apocalypse thing, which I think is the absolute nadir of this series for me by a wide margin. I hated that movie all the more because it was a sequel to one of my favorites in the series that I thought left it in such a good place moving forward, and just shut everything down. So I guess you could say I wasn't in the most positive place going into this.
Yeah, cool. Well, I've been revisiting all the films recently, and it is, as you guys said, wildly inconsistent. It's a hodgepodge mess. And even in with the films themselves, as you said, kind of first class, great first half, very, very, very painfully average second half. So this Fox franchise is plagued by continuity errors. It just doesn't fit together, but the performances and the characters are so memorable. Some of the most memorable characters you'll ever get on the big screen in this comic book, in these comic book films. So, and yeah, I agree with you guys. The trailers are pretty average.
Well, I mean, just Hugh Jackman alone is synonymous with Wolverine. It's really hard to try and separate those two.
Not to mention, not once but twice, they have got the perfect casting for Charles and Eric.
Yeah.
Twice they've done that.
Totally.
Disney has a hard road ahead on that one.
Yeah, most definitely. And yeah, the trailers for this, as we've been talking about in our weekly show, have been fairly average. Nothing out in here has really impressed me. Some of the CG works look cool, but that was about it. So guys, let's get into the non-spoiler part of the review. Let's get into the film. First thing off the bat, I'd like to say, in terms of the positives, is I thought that James McAvoy did a really fantastic job. I felt like a lot of performances in here felt like they were phoned in and they'd like really checked out, and I feel like he didn't check out of this.
He was great, as always. Just from the first scene he showed up in, I was like, wow, I instantly remember why I love him so much in this role and how great he was cast. Because Apocalypse really, I cannot overstate the amount of damage that did to the franchise in my eyes. I really just tried to wipe everything from my mind. And then seeing him show up in this movie, I'm like, yes, I strapped in and got ready.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's some really good talent in this film, and that shows, as you said, James McAvoy and old mate Macbeth.
Yeah. Fassbender,
thank you.
Macbeth.
Fuck. Yeah, I think that they have been as solid as you can be in this franchise throughout. And I think that kind of gives a center to these films. If nothing else, you can kind of follow these two. And that, for me, has been one of the core, drivers in getting me to come back to some of these films. So yeah, I think that James McAvoy and Fassbender both did a really good job.
Building on that, I think I really liked Sophie Turner in this movie.
Yeah, me too.
And part of that would be because I've severely underrated her in pretty much everything I've seen her in, especially Apocalypse again. But I thought she really anchored this film well.
I totally agree, man. I thought her was actually, I liked her more than Fassbender even in this. So I would say the MVPs for me, McAvoy and Turner for sure.
Yeah, completely agree.
I will agree that I think Turner was good, but I think that there were moments where she wasn't really given too much to work with. I think that mainly had to do with some of the writing. I wasn't as sold on the character, and I don't think that was Turner's fault. I think that was largely the script fault. And to be honest, some of that bled through from McAvoy and Fassbender as well. When I say that I enjoyed their performances, it's kind of, I'm always going to enjoy Fassbender, McAvoy because I think that they're really good actors.
Unless they're in X-Men Apocalypse.
Comparatively, I thought that they were, this is probably one of the weaker performances I've seen them in.
Really?
In the franchise.
See, I disagree. I thought James McAvoy in the script, whilst the script wasn't amazing, they had some really interesting themes that they haven't tackled with his character. And some of the motivations for him made him a little more complex than they've made him in the past.
Yeah, they followed some threads that they kind of tapped into with X3.
Yep.
And I thought there was a lot more nuance to it, and it just worked a lot better, and he sold it so well.
Yeah, and they petered out. The threads weren't fully explored, but there was something in there that really piqued my interest, and I enjoyed quite a lot. Seeing another side to that character that I love so much. Off the script, the script in this is not great. And we've had, as I mentioned at the beginning, we had a June release date. Oh, sorry, a November release date, then a February release date, and June release date now. And I feel as though this film has definitely a sort of hacked up feel to it. There's certain sequences that feel out of place. It just doesn't feel like it's got a really solid arc, beginning, middle, and end to it. It feels like it's sort of a beginning and a middle, and then
Yeah, and we knew that going in, that the whole ending was reshot because of its similarities to another superhero movie recently. I thought the dialogue was incredibly cliched and generic for a lot of it.
Yeah.
But I that wasn't a problem when it was working. When it was working, it was completely serviceable, and the performances sold it completely. When it wasn't working, it was like it just felt like a very standard kind of comic book movie.
Well, not even just a comic book movie, just like a very stock standard movie. And I think that for me was one of the things that kind of brought me out of it. I think that what this movie was aiming to do is have a lot of kind of emotional depth. And I felt like they kind of kept tripping over some of the scripting and some of the plot points that just didn't quite let it get there or where it was trying to go.
Yep, totally.
I don't know if you got that as well. Is it worth talking about like maybe the pacing a little bit as well? Because I think that is directly affected by the script as well. I found that the pacing in the first 2/3 probably for me felt a little bit weird, and I think that was largely due to a bit of a disjointed kind of plot format. So I felt like I was kind of just being hauled along the plot. I don't know how to describe it. Like I'm kind of dragged along. And you know, when I enjoy movies, I kind of feel like I want to go along with the adventure. Like I'm trying to show me the next thing. And this one, I felt like, you know, it's just here's the next scene, and they just kind of plop me in front of it and like, watch it. All right, now here's the next one. I'm like, oh, stop, please.
So I actually popped into this movie for a second time, and
it's been out for a day, Ben.
Yeah, no, I have problems. That's why I have a podcast. I got to say, I really quite like the pacing of it. It feels like kind of a more personal story, despite the scope, which is quite large in a lot of ways, that builds to a relatively intimate climax for these superhero movies. This movie does kind of lose me at some point. I just haven't been able to pinpoint exactly where that is yet, but it's pretty well into it, I gotta say.
I mean, I almost had the exact opposite, where the beginning, I just couldn't quite get the hook with it. Like it just felt inconsequential for most of the film. And then towards the end, I think that they moved up towards as you said, a little bit of a more intimate climax. But because there wasn't the kind of base laid out for me, what they were trying to achieve with the ending didn't quite land for me.
Yeah,
I feel like if they had... Sorry, you go.
No,
ahead.
you go.
I was going to say, I feel like if they had paid a little bit more attention to the beginning and like kind of... If that felt a little bit more well-oiled, I suppose is the best word for it, the ending probably would have stuck a lot better for me.
I thought the front half... I enjoyed the front half more than the back half.
Same.
I thought that it kind of meandered and I'll agree with you, Connor, in that you're kind of being shoved into each scene. There was no kind of like, this is where we're going. And we don't necessarily need to exactly know where we're going, but there has to be some kind of through line for me to really get something out of a movie. Like whether it's a character arc or a destination or some kind of growth. That's what was sort of lacking a little bit in this film. But I truly, truly loved the first little bits of it, man. I was like, wow, okay. Are we in for something that I'm actually going to really enjoy and the other dudes are going to hate? Like, I thought this could go either way, because I thought, especially that first action sequence in space, that was very, very strong, I thought.
So we were going into this, we should say, with the reviews being like on Rotten Tomatoes, they were like 15% yesterday, around 20% today. So in that context, I was watching pretty much the whole first half of this movie, loving it.
Yeah.
I was super into it. And especially, like you say, George, right at the beginning, everything was firing for me. The one takeaway I had for Apocalypse, the one not even positive but neutral thing I had to say about it was the way that movie ends. You know, it has the whole team in like their 90s costumes in the danger room, like, let's go be X-Men. And I was like, okay, they've assembled a very capable cast here who were horribly used in this movie, but I've seen them in other things and they've done well. I could see them moving forward with this setup, this basic X-Men team with, you know, Professor X and Magneto out there, and they could take that somewhere really interesting,
Yep.
just really classic and iconic. And I think I half got that in this movie.
Yeah, when they're in the X-Jet at the beginning,
Yeah.
it was cool, man. It was really, really cool.
Yeah, I was
I
really
did like
digging that.
seeing them like do a mission.
Being
Yeah.
a functioning X-Men team, it just never
Yeah.
happens in these movies.
Yeah.
The first three are so kind of gritty in a lot of ways, and all the dark leather later on when they do assemble, and then some of the others are just all really weird in different ways. There is always little caveats to it, but this was just like a functioning X-Men team. I'm like,
Yeah.
finally.
Yeah, they went out, they did a mission, they came back, it was successful type thing. And I really enjoyed seeing that. I mean, it just, like I said, I think that some of the scripting and dialogue and just general plot points felt a little bit like just there wasn't a natural flow to them. And that really bothers me when I have that happen in a movie. Like if I feel like there's not a natural progression of events, then I get sucked out. Like I have no investment in what's going on. And I felt that so much in this film, just being like, this probably should, feel sad or joyous or something like that. I'm just not really convinced.
Yeah, I thought the makeup as well was really good in this. I don't think Beast has ever looked better, and I don't think Mystique has ever looked better.
100%, I completely agree.
They never nailed Jennifer Lawrence in the Mystique outfit. It was all far better in the original three.
Yeah, I thought this was the first time she didn't look like she was lathered in grease paint.
Yeah.
And there was a mixed reaction to when we saw the first photos because it was very distinct from her previous looks. And I'm completely fine with that because I think it's way better.
She
really
looks
like her look.
convincing as fuck.
Yeah.
Like,
Oddly
I was
enough,
stoked.
I found her previous makeup. I think I enjoyed that more.
Go watch it again.
Yeah,
It might be that because I haven't revisited the.
It's horrible, man. Especially when she's a
Really?
little kid in first class.
no.
I mean, like,
That is
there's some probably
horrible.
notable
Yeah.
exceptions to that, but just based on memory, I've never really had a problem with her makeup.
Your memory is...
Is it messed up?
It's
Is it not
messed.
good?
It's
Is it not
messed.
good?
and then Beast, given where they started in first class,
yeah.
that
Shit.
horrible,
Yeah.
could barely talk in that.
And it's not too dissimilar, but they've tweaked it
Kind of
just
doing the
enough.
Catman thing in that one. But it's more in line with the last couple of movies, I
Yeah.
think. And even Kelsey Grammer's in X3, which
Totally.
I still think is the high point. But for Nick Holt, this is the best he's ever looked. Easy.
I was just really pumped on that. I didn't think Nightcrawler looked as good. I thought he was okay, but those
As
two for
good
me
as
just
what?
nailed those two.
As good as what?
I don't think Nightcrawler even looked as good as he did in Apocalypse or X-Men 2 with the previous actor.
Yeah,
Alan Cumming.
I liked the previous actor in that. This I don't know. He just
Cody
felt,
Smith-McPhee.
didn't really feel like he had any weight to him.
I liked him a lot in
He's
this
pretty
one.
skinny.
Yeah, because
He's so gangly. He's like like you.
Well, I don't know what to say this now, but I would say there's a real inhuman quality to him. So I was watching him just then walking around.
No,
and
that sounds about right.
Seeing him next to Ty Sheridan, this very atypical kind of like strapping dude, and he's just like his big tail and his demon teeth and
Yeah.
everything. I'm like, that's a really good
Fucking
Nightcrawler.
awesome.
Yeah.
Fucking awesome, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, going back to Sophie Turner's, that arc, I loved some of the stuff exploring her past and some of the things that happened with Professor X. Like, I can't express how much I really did enjoy that, and I wanted them to keep pushing and pushing and pushing, and I felt like it petered out, and I was not necessarily disappointed, but just thought there was a slight missed opportunity there.
Yeah, for me, it didn't quite come off as convincing as I wanted it to. Like I said, there was just some of the character motivations that I didn't quite understand or weren't quite sold to me, in terms of like why she was doing the things she was doing and how quickly she decided to do those things. That was one of the things that kind of, I think, bothered me a little bit and made it feel as though the plot was just moving for the sake of moving, which is that she suddenly decided to do things. I'm like, oh, okay. There was no real build up to this or no reason that I could decipher that she would go and do that. But
I guess the one thing I could say outside of spoilers is that I think Kinberg did a much better job with her character than he did last go around.
Yeah,
In
he
X-Ray,
learned.
I think working with like the Phoenix character, I think it was so much better.
I mean, comparatively, yeah. Yeah.
I've got like two more things I want to talk about before we talk about spoilers.
Yeah.
One of them is my favorite aspect of this film, which was the score.
Hans, bro.
I had no idea Hans was doing this movie.
Hans, man.
So I was just
we
sitting
talked about that in the podcast.
Oh, I didn't listen to you. I
You told me.
I don't listen to me either. I going in today had no idea he was doing it, even if I did at some other point. And I was just sitting there the whole time, like, I'm loving every minute of this score. And then his name popped up at the end. I was like, wow.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Well, it does make sense, but also this is my favorite score from him in years, or one of them. And I was just so happy to have, especially after Godzilla last week as well. Just another really cool score.
I thought the Phoenix theme as well, with the haunting childlike voice, that was so fantastic. I did miss the. I don't know. Maybe it's just because I'm been watching the X-Men films, but I kind of miss the
John Ottman's score.
I
kind
of missed that a little bit, and I would have liked to hear Hans like, you know, like with his fucking 18 French horns and 47 tubas.
But I like they did their own thing, and I think this
totally
really
did.
stands apart from the other films.
Like, use this as the template for the score moving forward. Like, I know Fox doesn't have this anymore, but it was so good. Like that alone elevated this movie.
Yes.
Maybe 1 or 2 points. Maybe took it from a 5 to a 7 or a 6 to an 8 or something like that.
There's a scene very early on where the score is featured fairly prominently, and that for me was kind of one of the highlights. It was just like, oh, that's really cool. Like, it's cool to see that being featured.
Yeah, because Hans is one of those guys. When he is on, he elevates a film. All of the emotion is heightened in the movie for me. I can very safely say that I would not be speaking as highly of this film without his score in it.
It really gives credence to the idea that, you know, a lot of people say music and sound is 50%, 60% of the experience. And I truly subscribe to that thought. And this is, for me, another sort of tally on that.
Yeah.
But on the other side of that equation, the other thing I want to talk about is I thought this was a really good looking movie.
Man, it looks beautiful.
For an X-Men movie, for a superhero movie, I thought this was better shot than pretty much any MCU film.
Like some of the close-in shots.
Close-ups.
Yeah.
There were close-ups in this movie.
Like, it's not just
when have you seen one of them? Like,
close-ups.
when have you seen one mid-shot? Fucking MCU mid-shot. It's like we need to be able to fix
I
the
can see
effects.
his nipples.
We don't want to
It's
capture.
all
We don't
good.
want to capture performance. I was like, this movie just did close-up after close-up when the performance mattered.
Oh man,
I
really
found
sold
that
it.
with Beast as well, which is a bold move because there's a lot of prosthetic on that dude, and they went like hard to paint. They went right in.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, that's really cool. Like, you
Worked
know,
well.
they went for that, and the
Expressive.
makeup actually held up.
Expressive,
which in and
yeah.
of itself is pretty impressive.
Yeah, I 100% agree, man. I was just sort of like, this is probably the most polished X-Men film out there, and the cinematography, the depth of field.
Yes.
Like, there's some shots where, you know, just a part of their face is in focus and the rest is all out of focus, and it's just gives it that cinematic quality. So you get Hans Zimmer on there, you get the more sophisticated cinematography. It really does elevate the experience.
And honestly, a lot of the special effects, like the CGI, was really well done as
Very
well.
polished.
Like, I mean,
Really polished.
That could have just as easily been dicey as fuck. Like, it very easily. You know, it's the last in the franchise, supposedly. Like, you know, there's been reshoots. They could have cut
just
corners
dump it,
really easily.
dump it,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
And a big part of it, I think, is that this is just seemed like an assured production. So much of this was on location. Like, there was so little green screen in this movie. There was like some big effects shots, just a couple of them. Otherwise, this movie was not like lathered in CGI at all.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Like, just on a production standpoint, this movie is like the antithesis of Thor Ragnarok, which I think is something that just doesn't hold up visually too well. Like you were saying with the
Black Panther
with
as
the
well,
focus,
like, yeah.
you know,
The depth of
like
field,
everything is so flat in that movie,
Yeah.
which is typical of these Marvel movies as well.
And there's the foreground, the background, the midground. It's all in focus, and it's all clear as day.
Yeah. So I just thought not to overstate it, but there was some artistry happening here, which I guess was more impressive just because he's a first-time director as well.
Well, yeah, and it's part of me really wants to give Simon Kinberg a massive pat on the back, because I think, you know, he's really nailed it in some areas here. It's just, I feel like the script, like maybe if somebody else had come in, collaborated with him, done another rewrite, massaged it a little bit, and then he took, like, because he's very capable. He's an extremely capable director. He's got good taste. And, you know, it's just like he needed that extra layer in the script to make it work. And then this could have been one of the best X-Men films.
Totally.
Yeah, how do you top that?
Well, because I mean, like, you could say that about a lot of X-Men films. Just saying, like,
It's just those elements were so strong.
Yeah,
that
like the visual elements.
it
and
pulls those. So those
yeah.
other elements feel like they're lagging behind so far.
Yeah, X-Men Wolverine Origins could not have been that good with a rewrite. There's
Yeah, no,
plenty
good
of
point.
other
Yeah.
things not firing in that one.
Yeah. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about in the non-spoiler part of this review?
I think I'm good.
Yeah, I'll be really interested to see how I feel about this movie once I've digested it a little bit more, because you and me, George, we just came pretty much straight from the cinema.
Yep.
So we've just seen it. It's really fresh in our minds. I feel like this is the kind of movie that will probably sour over time for me. I feel like when I go back, not having the expectation of it being crap, kind of thinking, oh, maybe I'm in for a better experience this time. I might start to feel a little bit more of the cracks. I mean, we all know that we are like hugely influenced by how we walk into a movie. Like how, what are we feeling? Have we had a long day? How did we feel about the previous movie? How do we feel about the franchise? Like, you can watch a shit movie and be like, that was the greatest thing ever, if you're really into the franchise and you're just willing to kind of keep it elevated at all costs. Like, so I mean, I really want to see how this movie will sit with me, because I think that this will be one of those movies that changes quite a bit in my view.
Yep. Are we doing wrap ups now? Is that a wrap up?
I can finish off with the wrap up.
Can I just add one quick thing before we do wrap ups?
Okay. Yeah.
Is Jessica Chastain's character. Really, really enjoyed the androgynous look they gave her. She's like very little makeup and very clean look. But that was not really a very compelling character, and felt like there was some elements in there that were interesting, but it just was not expanded upon enough.
Yeah. I think we'll have to talk about that a little bit more in spoilers, because you can't really talk about them too much. But yeah, I do agree. I think that there's something left wanting with that character.
What were you feeling with that, Benny?
I'll save my thoughts.
Cool.
You gonna wrap up?
Yeah, I'll wrap up. Look, ultimately coming into this with such a low expectations, I think it certainly exceeded those expectations. I think that it was really strong on some of the visuals. I think that there was good variety in that, and some pretty strong CGI and special effects in this. I will say that I was fairly let down by, I think, the first half in terms of plot points and just dialogue, and the pacing. Something didn't quite click for me. There's something very off about that, and as a result, I felt very little engagement with this film and very little kind of emotional pull from it. So I mean, by all means, not the worst film I've seen this year, but certainly not great.
Mm-hmm. Benny?
Yeah, I going in with such low expectations really changes everything. This is the worst reviewed X-Men film, easily.
What? Even below Apocalypse?
Yeah, that was at like 47% or something on Rotten. Yeah, this one's getting absolutely slammed, and I think maybe a big part of that is just no one gives a shit. The franchise is over. They're like, who cares? Don't worry about it. There's never going to be another one. Forget about it. Given that this is going to be the last mainline X-Men movie we're ever going to get until it gets rebooted in the MCU, I'm leaving the series very happy. I think this is a real nice kind of rebuke of Apocalypse, which I never wanted to see another one of these after that necessarily. There's, like you said, George, this movie kind of falls apart towards the end, like so many of these do, just not in any way that I find damning. I enjoyed it. Like I said, I've already watched it twice. The stuff that's good is great, like series best kind of stuff.
Totally.
But all that being said, I don't want to overhype it. It's somewhere in the middle of these X-Men movies, probably. It's one of the few that isn't either just great or terrible.
I think at the end of the day, it will be kind of in that realm of just like, okay, there were some good things about it. And
if I had to pick a specific place or comparison, maybe I'd say First Class. I would say the highs are higher in First Class and the lows are a lot lower. And this sits in kind of the middle of that, like a little X-Men
sandwich. It's probably a good way to describe it, to be honest. Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the positive on this one. I think there's so many strong elements here. I actually had a good time in this. I just thought it was very anticlimactic at the end, and also to wrap up the series in that fashion. I wanted something a little bit more meaty, and I feel like the first half was really, really strong, and then the second half was but it was nothing painful. And Jennifer Lawrence kind of gave a fuck in this one, which was, I don't know, we'll talk about that more in spoilers, but that was nice to see. And the performances were great. And I agree with you, Benny. It's like, it's a nice way to kind of cap things off. It's not, it's definitely could even be in the top 5 X-Men films for me.
Yeah. I'm gonna hold this to you in like 3 or 4 weeks. I want to see how that
We'll see.
sits.
If we talk about the 7 films and not the Wolverine and Deadpool, this would be in the top half for sure. But once you add in Logan and Deadpool and all the spin-offs to the 12 films.
Oh, I thought you were trying to say like the good ones.
No. If you just take the X-Men films, the 7, this is definitely one of the stronger ones. So yeah, hey, pretty damn solid and not unbelievably painful like I thought it was going to be.